Welcome to a football show, Monday edition, the first show following, thousands of hours of content covering the NFL draft for the Tennessee Titans. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, and we've got the entire 7-round draft to look at in terms of strategy. What did we learn about Rand Carthon, Brian Callahan, the new organizational structure, their strategies, their designs? We've got 7 new players to break down. What does that mean for the depth chart, for the roster, and for the team as they enter camp? Value. Did they get value at each pick? Did we like the strategy? All kinds of stuff. We'll break down each of the players in a pick-by-pick breakdown as well. So a ton of stuff to do on the show. Zach, have you caught your breath after 7 hours of content on Saturday?
No, not at all. I am somehow more tired today than I have been any of the other previous days. We have a family friend in town who just got engaged while they were down here from Michigan.
Congrats.
And so we have been celebrating them and that. I've done yard work on Sunday. Not a lot of sleep for old Zach. And I am very close to telling my wife I will not be going downtown tonight for their final night because I am just dog ass tired.
Yeah, I agree. I agree as well. Jill says, I appreciate all 7 hours. Cole says, when's the next one coming? You got the 300-player breakdown coming yet? When's that one? D. Good says, after sleeping on it, how do you feel about the Jha'Quan Jackson pick? We will discuss each and every player, the entire strategy and each player. So we're going to go big picture, and we're going to narrow in on each of these players. Again, what do we think about the pick? What do we think about the player? What does it tell us about Rand Carthon, Brian Callahan, and what does it tell us about the depth chart moving forward? So I'm really excited to sort of last gasp this one here because I, like you, did not have a ton of time to rest. I took the 7-year-old, unfortunately, to the Preds game on Sunday afternoon, and I had to teach her right away what it's like to be a godforsaken Preds fan. I had to show her at 7 years old that this is what it's all about. There you go. What does Braden know about fish spit? I don't know actually.
Hey, you're gonna have to watch the show to figure that out.
There you go. Big sweat will be a problem in some form, says Chef Rand. We will get to all of this. You guys are active in the comments. We do appreciate that. Please give us a little thumbs up there on the YouTube page. I know people ask you to do this, but retweet on twitter.com. And of course, Facebook, share the show, tell people about it. And if you listen on podcast form, please write a review, 5 stars. If you do not give us a 5-star review, you are a hater. Quickly though, before we do any of that, I just want to say, truly Thursday and Friday night last week, Friday was one of the cooler nights in my career as a person in this godforsaken industry, to get to spend time with all of you who listen and spent money and put in effort and equity to come to this event. We raised over $2,000 for our kids over the course of the 2 nights. I want to say thanks to Edley's Barbecue for giving us some food and feeding us all on Thursday night. Special thanks to Lachlan Table for giving us a spectacular meal on Friday night. Sinkers Beverages. Oh, my God. Sinkers, you guys are a wonderful partner. Great service to the community in both Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville and as well in East Nashville with Sinkers. There's a reason you guys keep winning awards for the best liquor store in the city, and it's because you do stuff like this for your customers and for the community and for kids in this community. Could not say thank you enough to all of our sponsors. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. They sort of allow Sinkers to shine in this moment, and we really, really love their support. They've been on from the beginning. And so to all of you guys that support this, to Colby and Aaron and Elliot and Devin and John and Karsten and Paul and Daniel and Ryan and Joe and Tim and all the other people that showed up over the weekend. Just awesome. You guys were spectacular. You're great hangout. You guys are wonderful people, big Titans fans, and had a really good time personally. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Stoney Keeley. Thank you to the Sobros Network. Thank you to all the different people who contributed. Derek Mason, former Titans wide receiver, was there for Friday and just answered all kinds of questions and had a great roundtable with you guys. And not last, but certainly not least, thank you, Zach, for the work you've put in for the last month. And thank you for the work you put in on Thursday and Friday. And just appreciate you, man. So I think I don't think Stacking the Inbox, F Words, Kaharski Podcast, Music City Audible, Hot Read, any of the 440 Sports products, I don't think you can get better coverage of the draft than what you got with us. So thank you guys, truly, for all of you listening and for all the support we get from all the different organizations. It's really humbling, and We do appreciate you guys. So I just wanted to start by saying all that before we get into like, hey, fucking T'Vondre Sweat's kind of big.
I will have to say this: Thursday or Friday was incredible, and Derek Mason really pulled back the curtain. And you guys will, those of you that could not attend, maybe there will be something similar like this next year. But man, if you didn't buy a ticket and didn't get in, you really missed out, because that was incredible to hear stories, to hear insight into rookie processes and events, and the coaching insight that we got. It was incredible. There were still like 50 questions I could have asked before he left. But it was, that Friday night was just incredible. So, and it is your brainchild, Braden. So thank you for finally having a good idea.
Look, every now and then, right? The broken clock is right twice a day. No, but it's you guys that make it happen, man. It's Sinkers, it's Lachlan Table, it's Edley's, it's Zach, you, and Stoney. It's but most importantly, it's you, the listeners. And again, every single penny, everybody did everything for free. Derek was there for free. We were doing everything. Everybody did everything for free so that we could help some kids, and that's really ultimately what makes it all worth it. So, all right, we're gonna yell and scream about Titans draft strategy, or just praise the draft strategy, or praise prospects, or rip prospects. We're going to look at the depth chart. We're going to look at all the different strategies, what we learned about this organization through the course of the last weekend. But I guess I just would start with, because we got a lot of analysis on JC Latham in our last episode. I know, you did a lot of content on Saturday with the Hot Read guys. So I know you've had a lot of opinions out there, but having some time to let it sit and looking at the entire seven person draft strategy. Is there anything that's changed in your mind in terms of what they did with 7, what they did at 38, what they did later in the draft? Has anything evolved in how you viewed the team in terms of their strategy in this draft?
No, I like their strategy in real time. Outside of one pick that didn't thrill me or excite me, that was just kind of very meh. Everything is still the same. It's one of those few instances where my instant reactions line up with my reactions a couple days later, because we all know that there's always that instant reaction, then downtime to think about it, and then you're like, okay, well, this may be changed, or this may be changed here. But at the end of the day, nothing really changed for me in these last few days. I'm excited about the picks. I do think that despite what the national media would tell you is values and reaches and steals and all this stuff based on their big boards, I just don't give a shit about it. Like grading, we graded at the end of the thing just for fun, because we were just delirious at that point of 7 hours of talk. But at the end of the day, I don't like the grading system. I think that people, because it's subjective. The draft process is so much more subjective than what people give it credit for. And this is you can see that there's Titans analysts that hate it. There's some that love it. And there's some that are just like, oh, we'll see. And I do love it, but I also understand that just because I love it doesn't mean that objectively it will work out.
Right. I think that's a smart way to look at it. Joshua says, I don't like the Titan strategy saying in the second, but I'm curious where you guys are at. We will get to the trade, because I know we've had some people on Twitter asking about this, and I know you're going to talk about it a lot this week with Stacking the Inbox, so we'll get to that in just a second.
And I think Ed's right, by the way. With so many holes to fill, could we really be that mad no matter what direction they went? And that's true, right? And I think that plays into the trade talk that we'll get to later, but there are so many holes that you would think that maybe trading back would be the right path, but I don't necessarily think that is. But I will say that Ed's right, and it's something that we talked about. Is like it's really hard to mess up pick 7, and it's really going to be hard to mess up this draft and it not feel, because it's filling so many needs and so many holes. It's kind of really hard to get mad at it. It's easy for some because they're so outrageous with their observations and takes. But for those of us that have a little bit of, I guess, intelligence, for lack of a better term, or a proper temperament, maybe.
There you go.
That this isn't that hard to be satisfied with this draft haul.
Well, I think that was our entire message on the Monday show before the draft was, look, there's not a lot of strategies that are bad here. If they trade out all the way out of the first round versus sticking exactly in the 7 spots and taking them, there's all kinds of different strategies. They could have deployed everything in between, and the roster needs so many pieces that I think, and a lot of the players we really liked. I mean, we talked about Jarvis Brownlee a lot in the build-up to this draft, and so for them to go get him, we touched on Cedric Grey a bunch, but not as much, and so we'll get to him in a second. Here's how I would sort of describe it, and I think I said this on the Monday show and the prediction show on Thursday before the first round, which is this team has to focus on its front 7 and the offensive line. Like they did the receiving thing in the free agency. They did the cornerback thing in free agency. I wanted to see a lot of people, a lot of big beef in the middle. I wanted to see offensive and defensive linemen, front 7 players, and they did a lot of that. They got 2 off-ball linebackers, they got an edge, they got a defensive tackle, and they got a starting left tackle. So now we can get into debating the specifics of the tactics, which is different than the strategy. But from a strategy standpoint, I can even argue that I think going to get Cedric Grey at 106 and then telling us immediately afterward that he's going to wear the green dot and play alongside Kenneth Murray as a starter, to me, that tells me that even ties back into their free agency strategy. Now, it may be terrible, he may be bad, and he may not work out. But what it tells me is that they had a vision and a plan. They went out and executed it. They wanted tackle in the first round. They were looking at defensive line or maybe some flexibility with their second pick. We can debate what questions we have about Sweat or risk or not risk, but like, I know you love the pick. And so the point is I wanted a defensive lineman or a front 7 player with that pick. They did that. I can't get upset when they do the thing that I think that they should do. And then they addressed starting middle linebacker. They addressed another corner that we all loved. They got another edge rusher that is a bonus pick. Again, when you start talking 6th and 7th rounders, they're just sort of house money at that point. But they need a bona fide star edge player next year in the offseason. They probably need another offensive lineman maybe in the offseason. But by and large, they sort of addressed all the needs. Safety is still potentially something they could do.
They have like 15 or 16 offensive linemen, including these UDFAs. It's a high number of offensive linemen that they have. It feels like it's the most offensive linemen I've seen heading into like training camp on this roster.
And honestly, what I like about the strategy is that they all help each other. And again, we'll get into the specifics of the player. But T'Vondre Sweat, if he is the player they deem him to be at 38, then that's going to help Kenneth Murray and Cedric Gray and Jeffrey Simmons and the edge players. If JC Latham is the player that they deem to worthy of being taken at 7 overall, that helps NPF on the right. That helps Cushenberry. That helps Skoronski. It helps Will Levis. So like the ripple effect of all of these decisions, I think, I can't argue with the strategy. We can discuss the tactics, but I don't think we can argue with the strategy. The only part of the strategy that I think fans are, I think it's okay to ask the question, because I think Brian Callahan, the way kind of Mike Vrabel had to come out last year about Tajay Spears and be like, well, if the best night of his life was getting drafted, then we took the wrong player. And that
wasn't Spears specific. That was just overall draft specific.
No, but that wasn't like Rand Carthon's intent, but like he kind of said that, and then Vrabel kind of helped out. And I think that kind of happened here with Sweat as well, where Brian Callahan was kind of coming out and sort of like backing up the pick with some information. The trade back thing, I think people are focused on that. If he is the player that they think is going to be a starting defensive lineman in the NFL next to Simmons for the next 8 years, then the trade conversation is completely irrelevant. The question is, I think the more interesting question is, could you have gotten him later? And with all the stuff that's sort of swirling around him, you still paid a premium for him. And I think that's ultimately the only real question is like, well, could you have gotten him for cheaper or a little bit later and added something? Maybe. But maybe not. Who knows? You have to get your guy eventually.
Yeah. So do we want to just dive into the trade topic, I guess?
And we can kind of get it out of the way if you want. So
it's not an easy topic to discuss. It's a very complicated topic, right? Because the NFL draft is not built in absolutes. So let's start with what we know. We know they had several trade offers. We know that there were several second-round trades after them. Maybe even there were a couple, I think, before them, but we know that Atlanta traded up ahead of the Tennessee Titans to get Rook Nukem. So We know that another team valued a defensive tackle. Okay. The risk that happens with the trade back, and I think there's two things at play, right? So there's this national media narrative that this was a reach. So because he was ranked so low on big boards after the DWI, automatically means that he could have been available later. We know that the NFL, unless it hits a critical event, unless it is a critically dangerous event, does not really care about DWIs, does not really care about smoking weed. It does not really care about anything unless something major happens. Whether you agree with that or not, that's an entirely different discussion. Like whether you agree that that is a good process and that's how it should be handled.
I don't think anyone should give a shit about people smoking weed. No.
Right. Well, I'm just saying in general, you're going in a totally different direction that doesn't really matter. So, we have to understand that the NFL does not view a DWI as much as Dane Brugler viewed it. Heading in to this, before this event happened, the DWI, he was 33rd on Dane Brugler's big board, the 33rd overall prospect. After the DWI, he dropped around to 129. Unless time travel happened and someone went and changed the tape, that is the deciding factor of what moved him down that far. Does that mean that he maybe wouldn't have moved down to 38 if he viewed another player? No. I mean, maybe he moved down a couple of spots. If you look at the consensus draft board run, he was hovering around 40.6. So that was his average from March to the end of, or from February to the end of March. He hovered around 40.6 was his overall big board ranking. After the event, leading into the draft, it went from 40.6 to the average of 69.8. So I think we can all agree that if there is a pivotal point to examine, it's that happened. Like that is what moved him down boards, not the tape. Not like I said, most of these guys had him in the top 50, really in the top 42. So not the tape. So you are getting a second round player at a second round price. Here's the thing. The NFL views him as a second round player. We saw after Jazon Newton went off the board, here comes the Atlanta Falcons to get Rook. After the Tennessee Titans and apparently the Rams, it's been reported, were trying all day to move up to get Braden Fisk. But if you trade with the Rams,
Brandon,
you move back. Brandon. But if you move back too far, which that would have put them behind Cincinnati, behind Jacksonville if they would have made that trade. Yes, you get a future second round pick. And trust me, I love second round picks. But you have to say in that room, if we move behind this far, so if you took the Rams trade, how many players do we have on the same level as Sweat?
Yeah.
Because I believe it was 52 is what the Rams moved up from. So if you are at 52 and you're moving from 38 to 52, you have to have a lot of players at the same grade as Sweat. That is so unlikely, right? Because they were so convicted in it. If you look at the other trades with the Saints gave up a 150 and 160 or 150 and 190 to move up. That's not good. That's not good value. What do you need those picks for? A 6th and a 7th or a 5th and a 6th, whatever that may be. That's not really good value. The Eagles traded up to get Cooper DeJean, right? Well, they traded 50 and 53 and a 5th round pick, but they got back the Packers 2nd, the Packers 3rd, and a 180 pick. Well, you don't have a 3rd, so you're not getting that good of a deal, right? You don't have a 3rd to give up, so the Titans don't. So they're not going to get that deal. They're going to get a lesser deal. So it sounds like, for all intent and purposes, is that the Rams panic traded after Sweat went off the board because they saw Newton, they saw Rook get traded up for, and then they saw the Tennessee Titans take Sweat, and it sounds like a panic trade.
Yeah.
And now we just have to understand that the likelihood of the Tennessee Titans having that many players the same grade as Sweat is so highly unlikely at the spot they would have gone. And if he's their guy, you draft your guy. We say that about every player. Draft your guy.
So quickly, just so that people know, Fisk, defensive lineman, not the same type of player as Sweat, but a defensive lineman goes very next pick. The next 3 people traded. So the Packers at 41 move back to 45. They still draft probably the player they would have taken at 41, Edgerrin Cooper.
Right.
But that's, again, a guy that probably, to your point, does not have a lot of other peers in the evaluation process around that range, because the very next, I think, off-ball middle linebacker that's drafted, I believe, is Colson down at like 69.
What's your focus? What you got to focus on if you're the listener or the watcher is that it's Cincinnati and Jacksonville, right? You can't move past them. If you move behind them, because they took defensive linemen. And let me tell you something: Cincinnati would have taken T'Vondre Sweat. I am 1,000% convinced. And then you have Cleveland. If you moved back even further, you look at Cleveland. What if Cleveland wanted to try to trade up and got desperate because Sweat started to fall? So what if, they wanted to move up because they got Michael Hall? That's it. And Sweat and the Bengals double dipped at defensive tackle.
So Mason Smith at 48, Chris Jenkins at 49, Michael Hall at 54. So we know for sure, for a fact, that all 3 of those teams would have been looking at Sweat no more than 10 or 12 picks later. So if we're talking about a trade, we're talking about a 10-slot window at the best. So you're not going to get a ton in return. Now, I will disagree with a lot of the commenters here about like what Rand Carthon says on a radio show or at a press conference when he says, no. They absolutely, we knew teams wanted to come up and draft him. That may be true. It may not be true. It's irrelevant. I'm not taking anything he says because they can't, there's nothing else you can say other than we needed this. We wanted this guy. We're going to draft our guy. So I don't actually care what he has to say in an interview about any of the stuff. We just don't know. Like, oh, of course, Rand Carthon's going to go on the radio and be like, yeah, another GM told me they really wanted him. Like that helps sell his argument. So that's irrelevant to me.
He worded it. Let me just say this, just in defense of this, he worded it a lot differently than what you're talking about. It's worded with a lot more detail, and he didn't have to say it. He wasn't asked really. It was towards the end of a long conversation about other stuff and he didn't have to say it. So I do think that the team they heard from that he's referencing is 100% the Cincinnati Bengals.
So ultimately, you kind of address sort of like the media focus on T'Vondre Sweat. We can look at the actual facts of the draft that took place and know that there wasn't a huge offer, no matter what, on the table that is baked into risk to moving back and maybe missing out on him. It is also fair to consider the risk of taking him at 38. And it's okay to ask a couple of questions, which is, I don't care. Like, I do care about, driving under the influence, especially with kids that have opportunities to take, that kind of stuff. I think but ultimately, to your point, I agree. The NFL doesn't. What I do care about is decision-making. And the decision-making process in this month-long, 2-month-long, 3-month-long job interview to make the mistake. Okay, it's fair to ask the question. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player or a bad guy, but it's fair to ask the question, just like the weight. Fair to ask the question. And I think, and I'm going to take this from Koharski because I don't think he meant to say it like this, but I took it to mean a certain thing. He said he's a big man who has big man problems and he needs to have big man solutions. And I think of that as adult, like that third big man is being an adult. Like, you're a big man. That's who you are. And you're going to carry with you big man problems, which is you're going to have to focus and work hard on your weight. But what it requires is an adult, a grown-ass man, to make big man adult decisions about your career and your life. And the Titans, feel like comfortable that he's going to make those decisions. And so, again,
they did a good job of vetting it, right? This isn't the Isaiah Wilson situation where John Robinson's on record of saying, well, we didn't really do a really good job of vetting. They done a good job of vetting him. I mean, they went down to his,
they went down to
house,
Austin, right? Yeah.
Talk to his family and set expectations not only with him but with the family. And right there, to me, what that signals to me is that after they had their visit with him, they heard enough, and they wanted Sweat. After he came to Nashville after the DWI, they heard enough. And then they're like, it's time to make sure that he knows how serious he's going to have to take this.
Yeah.
We are going to go ahead and set down expectations. And we are going to tell him why these expectations are placed. And then we're going to inform his family of what their part can be in this as well. Because a lot of times what people don't understand is that the support system these rookies come in with is just as important. The established support systems that they've had prior to coming in that come with them when they head into the pros is just as important. I'm sure Lindell White would be one of the ones to tell you that he wishes he probably had a better support system.
Oh, Vince,
and a lot of those friends didn't end up being friends.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think, so I think that going down there and everybody having man-to-man, face-to-face conversations multiple times is such a different process, and should tell you that with the conviction that they have, that he was obviously not only their guy, but he was also their best player available. And I think that's where I think there's this thing that they're drafting for need. We know that is not what they do. We know that they play the board. And I think that just because they have so many needs, that almost any position that they could have drafted is going to look like a position of need.
Right.
But this is they're drafting the best players on their board, and they just happen to be, because of how the draft fell and how the board was set up, the positions of need. Of course, they have like 50 of them.
And I was going to say, I could argue edge pass rusher is a bigger need than a true defensive tackle that can sit up next to Jeff Simmons. And I think they do. Titan Maximum said they better put some weight clauses in Sweat's contract. I think there are actually. They're going to.
That's the general assumption that people have made based off of it could be expensive to be overweight.
Yeah.
That could mean that, if you stay overweight, you're not going to get a second contract. And it could mean fines as well.
That's true.
They may have fine provision. But let me say this. He's already down to 366. And the plan is to get him to only 355 to 350, according to his words. It doesn't seem like they've really set down an exact threshold because they're waiting for Zach Woodfin and him to come in. But even if they are, they're only asking him to drop at a minimum of 11 pounds. And that shouldn't be, with practices here and all that kind of stuff, and the weather and all that kind of stuff, it shouldn't really be that hard.
All right. Well, again, want to say special thanks to Sinkers Beverages and Kingston Group for us having Zach, guys, I wish you could have all seen Zach the moments before the pick on Friday night. Not only was it a great night for the kids and for our sponsors and for food and for all the listeners, but just fun to watch Zach just lose his shit when they picked T'Vondre Sweat, with how right he was, of course. Look, I love the strategy. I think addressing the front line is what I said on I want two big bodies to help the defensive and offensive lines, and that's what they did. So I can't argue with the strategy. And right now, JC Latham, and this is what we can start. Let's get this out of the way with the starting two, because I do think Sweat actually helps in a big way Cedric Grey, the 4th round pick. Like having Sweat next to Simmons and those two guys clogging up a lot of space is going to help Gray and Kenneth Murray in a big, big way from a movement standpoint. So ultimately, I think there's a lot of people saying like, oh, they didn't address maybe Latham's a right tackle. And you and I have talked a lot about the right tackle, left tackle thing, his journey, his career path. We've talked a lot about, if you get one great tackle, that's good enough. You still haven't solved the left tackle. He is the starting left tackle right now on this team. Mm-hmm. And if you put down the list of offensive linemen on the roster, because you mentioned there's like 14 of them, the top 3 offensive linemen right now on this roster are Lloyd Cushenberry, Peter Skoronski, and JC Latham. Not in any order, but just those are the 3.
Yeah.
One of them's a free agent, wasn't on the team. One of them's a rookie, and one of them's a rookie last year. That is overhaul on the offensive line. So clearly that they're doing that to try to help the rest of the offense. T'Vondre Sweat is a starter right now next to Jeffrey Simmons.
No doubt.
We will see what the management looks like for his weight. We will see if he can play on 3 downs for his entire career, for a short period, for all of it. Who knows? But he's a starter right now, which brings us to pick 106. And Cedric Grey, to me, the one thing I keep thinking of when I analyze this pick and I look at this pick and the name was announced, was that this was their guy all along. We can agree or disagree on whether or not he is, But to me, this felt like they had circled and targeted Cedric Grey at 106 the entire process, maybe even going back into free agency, that they really like
What
this
makes
guy.
you think that? I'm
So-
just curious. I'm not
so-
disagreeing or anything.
So I'm going to, some of this is just sort of trying to put some red string together here on the wall. But if you come out in a press conference after drafting a 4th round linebacker and say he is going to wear the green dot, that you think you're pretty confident in what you've drafted. You feel pretty highly about a player. And I think we all knew that he would probably be available around that slot. If not, again, if you look at the line
Earlier, I didn't think he would be there, to be honest with you. With the state of the linebackers, I really thought he'd be in round 3.
And that's totally possible. But if you see why they went and got Murray as sort of like a number 2, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's, to me, you put Sweat in front of him. Like, it all kind of looks like it was the plan. And if that's the case, I give them major kudos and major Rand Carthon and company and Brinker and everybody. I give them all credit for executing their plan. I don't know if it's the right plan or if it's going to work. I don't know if Cedric Gray's he reminds me of Jayon, like a bigger version of Jayon Brown, very athletic. He was a basketball player and an offensive player up until college, 360 tackles, 37 games started the last 3 years. Like, this guy can play. There's also scouting reports that are like, well, he gets kind of washed up in traffic a little bit. He's a little small. Like, he's got to work on his hand placement. He's a rookie. But to say in the press conference that he's going to wear the green dot tells me that he was pretty high on your plan, pretty high up on the list of things that you planned for. And I think, to me, that's what I like about them. They feel it feels convicted that they're going to go get this guy.
Every pick to me feels convicted, which is something that I don't think that you could say about every other draft pick that they've ever made in recent history, dating back to at least John Robinson. You could say it never felt like there was more of a draft class that was like every pick, even Jha'Quan, every pick makes sense, but they were convicted about every pick. And something about, getting your guy, and trade ups, going back to a little bit of the trade discussion. This shows that I don't know who is running the board or who is running the strategy of this draft, but the way that they just kind of sat there, even though that it did make it a 7-hour show when they could just trade it up a couple 7s for 1 and get us out there earlier.
No, they have to pick like the 5th to last pick in the draft.
But it felt like they had a good feel for what the teams ahead of them were going to do. They had a really good feel for what was going to happen. And kudos to whoever in that room, if it's a collaborative effort or if it's the chief strategy officer, which is Bryce Wasserman, who just recently got promoted. Kudos to whoever it was, because I was thoroughly impressed with the overall strategy of being able to sit there and have the confidence that you loved your board good enough and you had a very, very good idea of what was going to happen ahead of you, that you did not panic, that you did not do anything crazy. And you knew that guys like Jarvis Brownlee, who I know they fell in love with, we know that Tyke Tolbert spent a lot of time with Jha'Quan Jackson at his pro day, so they obviously liked him there too. Yep. Jaylen Harrell makes a lot of sense. Like, to me, it feels like they had a really good job. And I guess Team Ramrod says he thinks they credited Sarah Bailey for knowing when the positions run were coming. Good for her. I think that's tremendous. I think it shows a really good side of analytics, in my opinion. And they were just so confident in their process. Yeah. And I think the process will yield good results. Time will tell. But I even if they yield bad results, I will say this was a good process. It was good process, bad result. Is how I would label it. And
I agree. And again, to make sure we all understand, and I think people do, there's a difference between they love their board, they played the draft well, they had their guys, they felt confident in what they were going to be able to execute, and they went out and did it. That is not the same thing as saying the board is accurate, or Cedric Grey is a star, or T'Vondre Sweat will be a starter, or Jarvis Brownlee. That's not the same thing. They're different things. But yeah. I think it's hard to argue with their approach and their strategy. and what they went out and executed. We can absolutely have a discussion about whether or not Cedric Grey is capable of being a starting middle linebacker for the next 8 years. That's a different discussion in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, if you want to take the word of 17 scouts that were interviewed for a piece, and this was the Bob McGinn piece, when they go position by position, they were on linebackers. In interviews with several scouts, the consensus was that 6 of the top 10 linebackers are sharp enough to be green dots immediately or fairly early in their NFL careers. The list includes, and these are, I would assume, in order, because, I mean, this is kind of how I would put them in order almost, was Peyton Wilson, Cedric Grey, Jeremiah Trotter, Edefon Ulofoshio, Tommy Eichenberg, J.D. Bertrand, Junior Colson was a maybe. So I think that scouts all the way through, at least 17 scouts thought that Cedric Grey is green dot worthy. And so those 17 scouts are the majority of what, part of NFL teams. And I would assume, like you, that probably the scout that is in charge of scouting University of North Carolina felt the same. They saw the tape, turned it on.
Yep.
They felt confident enough not to use any kind of interview on Cedric Grey. The tape was enough. And what they found out in the process, of credit to the scouts, was enough for them to feel confident that they knew that this guy could be a green dot linebacker.
And I texted a few people that do some radio in the area just to get their thoughts and like what is their information, what's their intel look like, and there's a lot of sort of like, the guy loves ball, he's a vocal leader in the locker room, and he sort of exhibits some of the green dot traits, not just that a scout would see, but that sort of like just the average person in the area that watches North Carolina, that covers North Carolina, would see. Tim Dodge, good to see you good on Thursday, and good to have you here. Tim says they executed their plan well, but we can't judge if the plan was the right one until the game start. Yeah, absolutely, obviously, and sometimes you can't even do it until the next year or the year after. It's hard to know. As a Green Bay Packers fan, I sure wish they would have taken Peyton Wilson instead of Tyrone Hopper, but whatever. It is what it is. I guess they were worried about the injury history. Jarvis Brownlee at pick 146. Ultimately, what the Gray thing does is it is 3 starters, 2 on defense in the front 7, right out of the gate in the first 4 rounds, and it does push down a lot of meaningless pieces. And I'm not saying that to be rude to some of those linebacker guys that are on the roster, but there are 3 or 4 guys that do not belong in the NFL on this roster, and now Gray pushes them all down because now Murray and Gray are your starters, with Reese clearly as your number 3, and it moves I think Gibbons is probably your number 4, and it moves the rest of those guys out of the equation, which is great. So that's what you want.
I don't know what the plan is with this James Williams kid. He's obviously coming in to be a linebacker, and that's something, by the way, the Tennessee Titans should be hiring Stoney Keeley to be their scout, because that is exactly what Stoney said in the Stacking Inbox draft guide, is that he should be a linebacker. And I think we kind of both forgot that he was a linebacker at the Senior Bowl at some point, because I kind of remember it, but I wasn't really as focused on the linebackers as it was last year. But Williams, I don't know if you listened to all the press conferences and all the phone calls and all this kind of stuff, but there is a clip of James Williams being called, and he's just crying. He's passionate. And he's just excited. And I think what you said about Cedric Grey and what a lot of these scouts say in the same piece I referenced earlier is that you're getting a guy that loves football. And I know that there are some people who question whether T'Vondre Sweat truly loves football. I think he does. I think from everything we've heard the last 2 seasons, I think there was a time where you could maybe have that concern when he first started. But over the last 2 seasons, I think a switch flipped on. We know JC Latham loves football. He comes from a good background. James Williams love it. Jaylen Harrell comes from Michigan, where to be on the Michigan team, you have to love football. And I think Jha'Quan Jackson is cut from the same cloth as Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears doesn't seem like a guy that would be roommates and be a friend with anybody that doesn't love football as much as he does in high energy. This entire class is football lovers.
If Jha'Quan Jackson has any career in the NFL at all, it will be because of his brain. If Jackson has a career in the NFL, it is because he is tougher, harder working, and smarter than everybody else. That's the only way it's going to happen. And I'm not saying I think it's possible, but so I think Brownlee, again, I don't even know if we need to talk about him very much, because what I think he does is I think we can discuss the depth in the corner room and how this is one of the best corner rooms we've ever seen. I think he is going to be a slot corner in this league. He's got lots of press man ability. He could be a returner potentially as well. So could Jackson, frankly. Both those guys could battle for starting role in special teams. I think Brownlee's a contributing member of the defense. Now, is it a great thing that the Titans are going to be drafting 4th and 5th and 6th round players that we kind of are penciling in as contributors? No, but that's the state of the roster. And I think to get a guy like Brownlee, who I think that he screams Denard Wilson to me, and you add him with Awuzie, you add him with Snead, you add him with McCreary, and now you have 4 guys that you really trust, I think, to play defense. And I think Brownlee's going to have one of those careers, one of those seasons where he's going to start as like the backup nickel, the backup slot corner. He's going to work his way onto the field a little bit more as the season goes along. So he can do a lot of stuff, and I think there's not a whole lot to say about him because we talked so much about him leading up to the draft.
Yeah, I would just say that I know that he says that he loves slot, and this is almost the entire class, and I kind of feel like Jaylen Harrell may be a little bit of Jaylen Harrell and Jha'Quan Jackson are maybe a little bit not this, but it felt like, specifically talking about Brownlee and Sweat and JC Latham and Cedric Grey, there were definitive roles or definitive, we know that this guy could play inside, outside. They say that about Jha'Quan Jackson, but I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend that they really think that he could play outside wide receiver. No, I'm not going to sit here and really think that Jaylen Harrell is a 3-down player, but they can turn him into a 3-down player. I do think there is that potential. But I do with Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I do think that what this means is that whoever goes down with injury out of the top 3, he's the guy that's going to take that spot. So if that's McCreary, then he's going to go play the slot. If Cheeto goes down, McCreary's going to stay in the slot, and Jarvis Brownlee is going to go outside.
You think so? Okay.
I think so, because I think Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is built way better to play on the outside than that. So I think he's like definitive cornerback 4, like the definitive cornerback 4. He'll be anywhere.
I listen, I don't have to say a lot. I don't have a lot to say about him because I think he's a guy we all liked. We all appreciated. Again, this is a press man guy with speed, tenacity, and the ability to return kicks and punts. So I think he's a depth. I mean, they knew they were going to they had targeted some of these other guys later. So in that slot in the 5th round, you're taking a guy that if you get a contributor out of the 5th round, which they have done in the past, then that's absolutely a nice move there. Let's go to Jha'Quan Jackson. Again, teammates with Tajay Spears at Tulane. This is a guy who played in the slot. This guy has played through an enormous amount of injuries, toughness, IQ, did not have a lot of offers coming out of high school, although he got some bigger offers later in the process. And then he goes to Tulane because he wanted to be close to home. He never really was all that productive. But what I love about the scouting report and watching him play is like he has sort of all the things that you want out of a player coming into a career situation where he has to earn it. He is a great route runner. He's not going to be able to get off press coverage against good NFL corners. But if you play him in the slot exclusively, which I want to say he played like 85% of the time at Tulane, he was drafted, to your point, to play a role, which is to push Kyle Phillips or Treylon Burks or whoever it is as the slot receiver. He is there to push Jarvis Brownlee or whoever else it might be in the return game. He's there to push all those guys and to give them another option in those situations. So I'm not going to say that I think it's an elite pick or he's going to be a great player, but like when you tell me high football IQ, extreme toughness, hard worker, those are things I like to take bets on.
Yeah, I look at it like this. I mean, I liked a lot of other, not just wide receivers, but a lot of other players than Jha'Quan Jackson. And that doesn't mean anything. That's just my opinion. It doesn't mean anything about the outlook or anything like that. But when I hear people, because there's that one really good punt return for a touchdown, right? Or it may have been a kickoff return, but I think it was a kickoff return for a touchdown. That's one. You got to remember that he out of 10 of his punts Last year, he muffed 1. Out of 22, I think he muffed 4 in the previous year. So he muffs punts. And a lot of people are like, get ready for Kyle Phillips to learn UFL. No, Jha'Quan Jackson's presence affects Kearis Jackson more than anybody else on this roster. I think that they're going to run with both Kyle Phillips and Jha'Quan Jackson on the roster in the final 53, more than likely. But that affects Kearis Jackson, right? I mean, like Kearis Jackson's a wide receiver and he's your returner. But what also this kind of does is makes it. Sorry,
so,
I had a
no,
my
you're
dog
good.
was throwing up.
Is the dog okay?
Yeah,
dogs throw up all the time.
What do you want to ask? Because it may. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Malik Washington went 2 picks later. I know you like him a lot. Johnny Wilson went 3 picks later. Casey Washington went like 5 picks later. Tajon Palmer went a few picks after that. And that was kind of a start of a wide receiver run. Are there? Brendan Rice went about 30 picks later. Would you have taken Malik Washington over Jackson?
Oh, yeah.
Else?
I would have taken Malik, Taj, Washington. I probably would have even at that point maybe taken Brendan Smith or Brendan Rice.
Rice.
But there are others, but that's just a wide receiver because I think there were other players too. But I think at that point I would have jumped all over Malik Washington. And there's a reason why he fell. There's something that we don't know about Malik, so there's a reason why we fell. That's what we can always say. But what I'm trying to get at is that then the Tennessee Titans bring in undrafted free agent Gabe Jeudy-Lally, who they had returning punts. So this idea that Jha'Quan Jackson is your automatic punt return guy, no. What they have done is sign guys, and whoever wins.
Yep.
And if he doesn't win that over guys like Gabe Jeudy-Lally, Kyle Phillips, and Kearis Jackson, that doesn't say much about him being a wide receiver, but that is one of his paths as a 6th-round pick to not make it to the practice squad. Yep. Just because you're a 6th-round pick doesn't mean that you are immune from the practice squad. So now I do think I'm with you. I think his work ethic trumps a lot of my concerns because I think that he can do something. He can learn and grow. And obviously, like I said, Tyke Tolbert has shown immense interest in him. So there's something there. But we all also need to temper expectations that we're talking about a guy who is pushing Kyle Phillips for the slot role and only has to beat out Kearis Jackson and Gabe Jeudy-Lally for the return role, which should not be that hard.
So that brings us to James Williams at 242. We've already touched on him a little bit. This is a guy who played safety in college, but at 6'4", 231 is listed by everybody, and the Titans have already said it runs a 4.65, is going to play linebacker. I'm curious at that size, though. Like, it's funny. I saw that size, and I started kind of going back and watching a little bit of him, and I think you could be pretty versatile with him. I don't know if that means he's a true like off ball, Will Sam type of linebacker, middle linebacker. I don't know what that means. I think there's a lot of flexibility with what they could do with him in terms of even bringing him off the edge, bringing him as a blitzer if you want to.
Kind of like a Dane Cruikshank, a more explosive, better version of Dane Cruikshank, who we saw them use in a similar way. I think we called him that's how crazy we got in our 7 coverage. I was like, is he the poorest man's Kyle Hamilton? And I believe that we dubbed him third world country Kyle Hamilton.
I mean, I get what you're going for there.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's kind of the same thing, right? It's a little bit. It's a versatile piece that you can grow, and just because they helped grow Geno Stone. There's other players that Denard Wilson has helped grow that were 7th or undrafted free agents. But I can see on tape, like, these are some mean sons of bitches. Like, isn't this group almost made up of exclusively mean sons of bitches when you look at, James Williams, when you look at Tavondre Sweat, JC Latham, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr.
Jarvis
They're
Brownlee,
just mean
yeah.
sons of bitches.
Junkyard dogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Hey, by the way, William, you guys, you know me. I'm obsessed with pedigree. Williams, of course, #1 safety, 5-star recruit in all of America, coming out of high school, and in the state of Florida, was behind only a couple of guys in recruiting rankings. JC Latham was one of them.
Who is his dad? Or is someone says he's related? I think his dad was an 8-year vet.
He's isn't Jackson's uncle is Ed Reed, right? Isn't Jackson?
Yeah,
Jackson's
but James.
related?
Someone said something about James Williams having his dad was in the league for 8 years.
Jaylen Harrell's father played in the league, for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jaylen Harrell's dad played in the league.
Man, a lot of nepo babies in this class.
Well, Harrell's dad, and we can cover both these guys at the end here. Harrell's dad played in the NFL, but was a UDFA. And frankly, if you have a father who made it in the league as a UDFA, and you then played on Jim Harbaugh's defense, something about those two factors mean you're mentally pretty tough. I have a feeling
you said that must have been lying, because it doesn't look like that. No, I mean, his dad killed his mom.
Okay,
so I do not think that his dad.
I did not
was a 8-year pro. Whoever said that.
I did not.
Who said
that is not the direction I expected that story to go. But
yeah.
No, Harrell's dad was a UDFA and played in the league for a while. And so as an edge player, 6'4", 250 pounds, played 28 games on the last 2 teams with Michigan. So 2 teams that won Big Ten championships, won a national championship. Now, some of Harrell is production, 6.5 sacks, I think 10 sacks over the last 2 years. Some of Harrell's production is going to be tied to the fact that there are elite players everywhere on that defense, and that they were drafted everywhere. Colson and Santrasill and Jenkins, and like the best player on the Michigan defense is still there, who's the defensive lineman. Graham, I think, is his last name. He's a guy that's coming out next year. So a lot of him and his production has to be tied to sort of how good the rest of the team was. But to start at Michigan for Jim Harbaugh on 2 teams that won Big Ten championships and a national championship, and have a father who made it in the NFL as a UDFA, that tells me some mental toughness, some physicality, some understanding of the game. And then with Williams, it's about pedigree and athleticism, right? So like those are 2 sort of different reasons to draft guys, but I can see why they'd be attracted to both of those pieces. And frankly, they're 2 very big positions of need at the end of the draft. An in the box safety or a linebacker or an edge player, those are absolutely pieces that they need. So there's reasons to take both of them.
I was not surprised by the Jaylen Harrell pick, to be honest with you. I would have preferred Gabriel Murphy, but seeing Jaylen Harrell, what they say, they want guys that played in big games, love football, and there you go. It doesn't get much bigger than winning the biggest game in college football on the best defense as its leading tackle for loss leader and its leading sack leader. And maybe it's because of everybody else around him. I've seen a lot of people say that. But to me, Jaylen Harrell, guess what? He gets to play behind Big Jeff and Tavondre Sweat. He has Harold Lander across from him. He has 3 good corners behind him, and he has 1 good safety as well. I don't know. Yeah, you can probably maximize his talents as well. And I think all these guys have big chips on their shoulder. I know Jarvis Brownlee Jr. does, and I knew that before he actually said he would. I mean, I said it on the broadcast, is like, he's going to be like that Amon-Ra St. Brown guy that has a list of all the defensive backs taken in front of him. And I think Jaylen Harrell's out to prove something. James Williams is out to prove something. I think everybody they drafted not only loves football, but they have something they want to prove.
I think chip on your shoulder, sort of an edge to your game. Some of them are pedigree. The other thing that these guys all have in common, most of them, is that they kind of have a tie to somebody in some way. Like, you know, Latham and Harrell went head to head in the Rose Bowl. You got Jackson being roommates with Tajay Spears. Latham and Williams grew up playing against each other in the state of Florida. Like, there's just sort of some ties. So everybody's sort of familiar, and I don't know if that means anything, but it's just something interesting to take note of. Otherwise, you got 5 defensive players. You got 2 offensive players. They addressed a bunch of holes on defense. They added some depth. I'm curious to ask you in general, do you think all 7 of these guys make the roster, or is this a couple practice squad guys?
No, I think they all make the roster. I think the one in biggest danger of the 2, I think there's 2 that would be in the most danger, but I don't think they're in that much danger, and that would be Jha'Quan Jackson and James Williams. Now, if people are signed between now and then, like if there's an edge player, a notable edge player signed then I think that could put some heat on Jaylen Harrell. But right now, I think depending on where you put Rashad Weaver, I mean, I think Jaylen Harrell is rotational with
at best.
Artie Key.
Yeah. Well, either way, you're pushing. This is, I think, ultimately some of this too is you're drafting Harrell to push the Weavers of the world who are on their last opportunity. Like this is like there's guys that have sort of, and there's plenty of fans probably, and maybe even the coaches who are like, no, you don't even have any more opportunities. But ultimately, you're drafting guys to push people. You're drafting Jackson to push Kyle Phillips and Traylon Burks and NWI. You're drafting Williams to push Jack Gibbons, who could be off the roster. You're drafting these guys to sort of push the bottom of the roster down and to sort of challenge to see who can let the cream rise. And I think the strategy is sound. We'll find out if each individual tactic is sound or not. We got a long way to go before we pick any of that. But as of right now, there is a chance that you have 3 starters and Brownlee and Jackson pressing for contributor status right away. And that's a lot to get out of 2 picks in the top 100. In theory, it also says a lot about where your roster was. Yes, I acknowledge that. But otherwise, I think Titans fans should be pleased with the strategy, and we'll all learn together about the tactics.
And not overthink or look for negatives. Like there are negatives to these players, right? But you got to understand 90% of prospects have the potential to beat bust. It's not a very high amount of prospects every year that are bust proof. So they all have some levels of risk and stuff. I mean, A.D. Mitchell, he has unmanageable diabetes and all this stuff. And Keelan, just there's all kinds of stuff that you can nitpick and everything. And I'm not saying you can't be critical or ask questions or anything, but just going out of your way to overthink strategy or the player, to go out of your way to be overly negative and to somehow be blindsided by picks I don't know how you could be blindsided by some of these picks because they pretty much telegraphed what they were doing with visits and what was said on the radio by sources and stuff. So I just enjoy it. Listen, we got a lot of time for you to start poking holes in games of these players and stuff. Just enjoy it for a little bit. Enjoy that we saw a good sound strategy at work. We won't know the results for a year or two.
Yep. I am excited about camp getting here, of course, which is not until like July, but you do have rookie mini camp and stuff coming up, I think, at the middle of May. So it won't take too long before we actually get to see him running around a little bit. But I think they've added, ultimately, after free agency and the draft, the roster is significantly better. And I think that's all you can ask for from your front office.
And I think they had the best draft in the AFC South.
Oh, there we go. So we'll get to the rest of the AFC South, the UDFAs, and sort of the entire offseason strategy, because there's a chance they're not done in free agency yet. There's a chance that there's some pieces that could still be acquired. So there's still lots to do here, and we'll see. And, Lloyd Cushenberry and Will Levis, maybe they'll get another playoff game to show up at. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see. I'm with you. I don't think the Predators are coming home. But special thanks to Sinkers Beverages.
They're coming home. They're coming home all right.
Yes. Dejected and defeated. So special thanks to Edley's Barbecue, Lachlan Table, Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group for making all of last weekend possible and for helping us do some good work for the kids. Special thanks to all of you folks out there who bought tickets and came out on Thursday and Friday. We sold out again. So it's all because of you guys, and you guys did all the work and showed up and had a great time. And special thanks to Stoney and Zach for doing their work that they've done, not just the last weekend, but for the last month and a half. StackingTheInbox.com, football and other F words, all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. And so if you like what you hear, you like what you did last weekend, please give us a subscription, give us a little thumbs up there, subscribe to Stacking the Inbox, write a review on the podcast page, just do something to help grow the products. And we can keep doing cool shit for you guys. That's really the goal here. And you guys, it's all for you. So thank you for everything. And Zach, thank you for everything. Thank you guys for listening. And we'll talk to you on Thursday. Have a good week, everybody.